One, two, one, two, one, two. Can I get everyone's attention, please? People who are still over there, can you please find a seat so you can feel comfortable for the next hour and so? We have a super exciting meetup, hopefully again today, here at the Testlio headquarters. So if any of you don't know me, my name is Kristel, and I am the CEO and founder of Testlio, and we are a company that is connecting enterprises with the best global community of testers to provide amazing customer experiences. And today's agenda will be to, well, first off, my introduction. So you all know about me. Then for the next 15 minutes, I'm going to ask our head of sales, Michelle Surya, to answer a couple of my questions. Then this will follow with a panel which is being moderated by my amazing co-founder and husband, Marko Krustik. And we have some really cool panelists as well today with really crazy experiences. So, and then we'll have 20 minutes for Q&A. And the best question will get a prize. So we just want to empower you guys to really ask questions and get the answers that you need as well. And then, we'll finish up with some mingling. Hey guys, can you be a bit more quiet over there? So I think it's a bit, maybe disturbing. Awesome, I get everyone's attention. So I think now would be a very good time to have Michelle here. So, woo! Yes, you can take this one. So I don't know whether we should sit as well or not, but can you do it? Yeah. Yeah. So
test.
It's working.
You want to sit?
Yes, we can sit. So first off, so this is Michelle Surya. Michelle is here from San Francisco, and she has been leading sales at Testlio for the past 2.5 years. And she has been working with some of the coolest companies in the world and is continuing to do so.
Still.
Awesome. And today I think I would really like to, as our topic for today is to really understand the business value of testing, I think we should talk maybe a little bit more about your experience. And then maybe you can start with telling about your experience and some of the relevant companies that you've worked for previously before Testlio.
Perfect. Will do. So hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Surya. As Crystal said, I'm from San Francisco. And so I've been with Testlio in August, will be 3 years. This is a wonderful company if you don't know and you aren't familiar. Every one of the employees here, most of them are standing over here. Oh, and Ural from San Francisco as well. Wave. He's
we had our quarterly planning. Yeah.
But I'll go a little bit background in terms of my professional career, but I do have to say when I met Crystal and Marko, I truly fell in love with them and who they are and what we believe in here at Testlio, and so we'll kind of go into that as well. But I think for everyone in this room, especially if you're looking for a job, we are hiring. But it is honestly the best experience I've ever had, definitely in my professional career, but even just in life itself. I think the team itself is amazing and what we're doing, again, we'll get into that, but is pretty cool and pretty fun. Can I get just a kind of round and see who's in IT or tech in the audience? Is it every single person? I heard, George? And anyone not in tech or IT here? There's a few, cool. So background, I have been in startups my entire career, so I was really lucky to kind of stumble into really accidentally before I even graduated college into the startup community. I won't go so far back, but I think the most relevant experience started with a company called Criticism about 4 years ago. They are mobile SDK that monitors mobile applications, basically mobile app monitoring and taking a look at crashes and bugs and on devices and where those kind of show up for customers. We had customers like Disney, LinkedIn, AT&T, Pinterest. So a lot of big guys. So that was when, I think I started a little bit before that, but that was the biggest experience I had in terms of working with a really small mobile company in the startup space selling to huge brands. Essentially enterprises, but there's a lot of big kind of, we call them mobile giants or mobile titans. Like a Snapchat would be an example, like prior to IPO. And then from there, I went a little bit further back in terms of the development process into a company called Pipedrive. We did mobile QA, but automated QA. So pre-release builds that we were testing, running automation on devices, hooked up to a software that basically could simulate kind of like real user behavior at scale to try to collect data before we push those apps live. Again, a lot of really big companies there, like United Airlines, Live Nation, Fox, which is a big, I think like Fox Studios, a lot of like movie stuff, but based in LA. And then I think it was 2013, probably 2014. Purify was acquired by Google, and they had a big announcement. So one of the early investors or advisors of Testlio had seen the news and reached out to me. And so he was actually my first intro into Testlio, but again, I kind of like fell in love with the space I was already in. I had the Rolodex that seemed relevant. Selling to mobile developers, engineers, kind of like VP of engineering even and above, and then specifically in the QA space after that, so it just really made sense to me. And then Testlio, of course, you described what we do, but really took it, I think, like back to the basics, which was interesting because I sold automated QA. I kind of sold this idea, this philosophy that manual testing was kind of what we have done in the past and we need to get automated. But because I was in like the really nitty gritty of Purify, I could see that automation was not at all automated. There's so many people and really expensive resources to take a look at what this costs to do, that it was really a no-brainer for me to come to Testlio. And I think that I have the experience and the understanding and working with all these companies to see that manual testing is definitely not going anywhere. And in fact, what we need to do is take a look at it as an industry and really kind of uplift it. And so I think that's what we're doing here at Testlio, is making testing super, super sexy. It always has been. We just want to make sure everyone's really aware of it. And so we can get into that too, but I think with some of the big companies that we do work with, we really uplift not just the individuals that we work with on the QA side, but the entire department, and show other customers as well as other departments within that organization, product, design, engineering, and even up to like the C-level executives, just how important product quality is. And so it's really cool in the last just under 3 years, we're seeing a huge change in the amount of responsibility and budget that's being poured into QA. And it's really fun to be at the forefront of it. And even though we've done some really amazing things in the last, like again, under 3 years, it feels like it's just the beginning. And so it's still taking off.
So thank you for the wonderful introduction, Michelle. Having you on board with Testlio has been really awesome experience, and I would have never expected a salesperson to be so being so understanding about like the entire space. And like when sometimes I feel like Michelle is as good as a QA manager as I am personally. Like she really understands every part of the development process, and I think it's very valuable for you if you understand. Like you can actually put that into like when you're going to companies, really understand how we can provide value to them. So my next question would be, what have been some of the biggest learnings for you based on your experience working with some of the biggest brands in terms of like the development cycles and QA in general? Like what are some of the biggest learnings throughout your career?
Yeah, definitely. I think, and this happens, I think it was empty. I think we have a lot of examples of this, but some of our larger customers, and especially early on, I really take a different approach to sales and really want to get in there with the customer. And I don't just close a deal and then move on, especially early days. Like I wanted to learn how to sell this, what Testlio meant to the customers that we were working with, why they were so enthusiastic about what we did for them. And then learn, because we were a tiny company, I was number 6 here, so I really wanted to understand what else we could do, what else our customers were looking for, and see if we could support them on those things. And so what I saw really early on is that QA is tough to cover, and it's hard to find really quality QA testers. They may not be engineers, they may have some background, they may not at all. And oftentimes I meet QA directors that say, you know, anyone who cares enough, who's willing to, I can teach them how to QA well. And so it didn't mean you had to go through some fancy or expensive program, yet still it was so hard for them to get good quality QA testers into the organization, and hiring and staffing and getting that coverage was and still is a huge pain point. So we came in and couple things. So CBS Interactive, I think, is a really good example of this, and they were one of our first larger, like really kind of behemoth customers. And if you're not familiar with them, they are one of the biggest media companies, one of the main 4 media companies in the United States.
They have Big Bang Theory, right?
Oh,
yes.
Big
Big Bang Theory. You all know Big Bang Theory.
And Big Brother. And The Bold and the Beautiful, Marco. What? He learned English watching that. Yeah, so if you're that, CBS Interactive, or CBS runs all of those, and Interactive is the digital kind of arm of that, which that's another piece of this, interestingly enough. You know, traditional broadcast systems really have changed the organization, that digital is just as equal to their kind of like traditional broadcast. And so you can see that digital and mobile is extremely important. But we came in and there was 4 individual contributors on the QA team, and really quickly we watched just how much responsibility was thrown on them. And so in a short amount of time, they became this really central team to product, to design, to engineering, like I spoke about, and really had direct ties to their VP and their SVP that are so obviously interested in ROI and sort of like the revenue piece of it. And really, it's been now 2.5 years. It was almost at the beginning when I joined, and so just about 2.5 years. And that team has grown to 16 people internally, I believe. And our engagement with them has grown so much. I think it's quadrupled since we've been engaged. And they now set so many standards internally and deadlines. And so instead of waiting for development, they really kind of like set a benchmark of when they need to deliver things, of what they need to do, and being able to set expectations for the whole organization. And every single year you watch more responsibility and more budget being poured into that team. And so again, it comes back to the philosophy that we wanted to take on at Testlio, is that this is a really important organization. This is a really important piece of the whole digital process, and they've just been an amazing kind of proof point in that it is there is a need for it, and there's a hunger for it, and we've been able to do that. And so I think when people think of QA, it's sort of like just QA or at the end of a development cycle, and we really get integrated into the entire development process. We want to get ahead of the problem. And so instead of having a development cycle that's maybe 4 or 6 or 8 weeks and then test for a couple days at the end of the cycle just before you push it out, someone's giggling in the front, and you can see why. It's like that just doesn't make sense. And so we are an extension to engineering team, and we want to be a part of that process. And so we get on board week after week. And so if there's engineers in-house that are building something in a given week, someone should be looking at it, right? So you take a look at it, there's a couple issues here and there. That way you don't have an entire backlog of issues in one sprint and have a day or 2 to fix them before you go live. A lot of people take this sort of like cross their fingers and hold their breath and just like hope that no issues show up. But that's never really the case, and especially with the big brands that we work with, it's not just quality, and it's not just an issue that plagues the customer. It's their entire brand name at stake. And that's why I just think this is so important. And again, in just a couple, less than 3 years, I really see that sort of uptake, and people are really, really taking QA seriously.
So yeah, I think it's been like we've been educating the customers, and the customers have been educating like us as well. So we constantly learn from each other, and I think that's really a big part of like the Testlio as well. Like we're really trying to change the way QA is done, and I think, yeah, that's the way we do it. And I think I wanted to thank you for answering my questions, but I would now like to get the panel. Yes, here. But after this panel discussion, you'll probably have an opportunity to ask more questions from Michelle as well, so she'll stay here. And then, yeah, thank you so much, Michelle.
Thank you so much for having me.
And yeah, so one thing that I think I forgot to say beforehand when I started was that thank you so much, everyone, for coming here today and being like wanting to learn more about testing and the real value that businesses get from it. And so, yeah, now I have Marco here, who will be moderating the panel today. Last time it was me, so now I decided for Marco to do it. So, Marco, the stage is yours.
Thank you. What an awesome intro, definitely. And thank you, Michelle and Crystal. We're going to invite now 4 very awesome people who in some way, some more than others, have been in the testing industry or connected with it. So let's first off invite here Helena Jeret-Mäe. She's head of testing at Nortal, and she's the most connected to testing industry. She is super passionate about it, and she hasn't, I think, been in development and this classical background where somebody wants to become a developer and or is going from development to testing or whatever. She basically went from technical writing as to testing, and which is awesome, I think. So next up, let's invite Tiit Paananen here. Tiit is head of quality at Pipedrive, and previously he was in Skype as also related to quality head and also general manager of Skype Estonia. And his passion is definitely in quality. Next up, let's invite Kristjan Uba.
Ikkagi gentleman.
Kristjan is a development manager at you have to say
Group?
that Betsson. I was actually using Google Translate. I looked at your website as well. I don't know if you've tested it, but it's blocked.
It's Estonian government rules.
Okay. Yeah, I noticed it. And next up, Einar Roosileht. You took my seat, but it's okay. It's okay.
Don't be afraid.
Well, middle is also
I can
good,
be in
no?
the middle. Einar is CTO at Rush Interactive. And I think, if I may say so, Einar is has been the least on the testing side of the software development, which is awesome to have that contrast. It doesn't mean he hasn't touched testing itself, but we have this wide range of different people and backgrounds. I'm going to sit as well now.
I can definitely appreciate the testing, value of testing though.
Let's get into that right away. Can you also, being from as a technical background, measure business value, or is it possible?
Well, as most of the people here have technical backgrounds, so you know that anything that you measure or anything that you set KPIs on, it can be gamed. So not really that much measuring. I've been more involved in smaller companies, and some those companies have grown very big, like Playtech, for example. Earlier it was 50 people maybe, then the transition to 500 people, and well, I definitely can appreciate the side of being smaller, where you can more focus on the value of things and less maybe KPIs.
I can definitely understand that. I think that is the underlying, me being from the technical background as well, and always thinking about how to measure the value, because the topic today is like business impact, business value of testing, and I think everybody can agree that it becomes more important later on. The bigger you get, the more business value and so on. But Tiit, what do you think? Coming from 10 years before Skype, software development, and then Skype, then Pipedrive, and so on. Like, how, like, can you quantify the output of your work?
Yeah, I guess testing is like teenage sex. Everyone talks about it, but nobody's doing it actually. At least that's something you see when you surf around, even in the biggest companies. The product quality is really something that often is not there, actually. But somehow those companies still survive, and I guess they're doing something right. My experience, of course, with testing is that before like 2001, 2002 in Estonia, nobody really did any testing almost. But then it sort of started to kick in as an actual discipline that even people were taught in universities. And it became actually part of the driver as well for general success of the products. And some of the products, I mean, you sort of assume quality to be there. It's not you don't measure the quality when it's there. You start and can start measuring quality when it's missing, because then everything starts going south, right?
In a perfect world, we don't need testers, obviously, right? But
well,
the world isn't perfect. So.
Actually, there are some disciplines and in some scenarios where testers are not needed.
Please explain.
Yes. For example, if you have a SaaS application that we update about 30 to 40 times per day, which means that when you use Pipedrive, probably in the last 30 minutes it was updated. And you don't notice it, you just continue working on it, etc. In order to do that, you need to have those updates really small and atomic, sort of contained. In order to release so much, you have to automate basically everything. So when a piece of code is going live, and usually one task is deployed to live after it's done, so it takes a couple of days, you deploy to live. It takes a couple of days to deploy to live. You run your unit test, you run your static code analysis, you run your functional test, you run those same tests in functional or integration test environment, and then you deploy to live, and it all takes 30 minutes. And testers, so far, hasn't been the discipline at Pipedrive, but it's going to change.
Why?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It's going to change because the product management who has been driving this sort of acceptance criteria measurement, there is a task, I want this task to do this, I can see that it is doing that, it goes to live. It's getting overwhelmed because engineering organization grows, more teams, more smaller microservices, and some of the services not really participating in product features, but more participating in facilitating the whole architecture, etc. In that moment, you need actually somebody looking into the requirements and actually designing the test cases, understanding what is the feature coverage, how is the code coverage measuring up to the actual features that are delivered via that code, etc. And then you need somebody who look into the what kind of test cases have been run, what is the statistics of those test cases? If you run them 10 times per day and 7 days per week, then you had lots of data, and you can't start looking individual results anymore. You have to start looking at trends, and then testers in the new format will come in and start facilitating this process.
Thank you, Helena. What do you think about that drastic view that Pipedrive has created? Like they almost, Tiit said basically they don't need testers, but they're getting there.
I don't think it's. Is it Anna?
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
The way I see it, it's then not about the role itself. It's more about your strategy of how you find out what is happening and what is important about the things that are happening. It doesn't really matter who does it. Sometimes it makes sense to bring the kind of the feedback loop closer to the source, and the source of trouble, by that I mean, of course, developers. So,
very close. Very close.
So that is just like a strategy how to do that. You don't need tester to be a separate role at all times. It's more about the overall strategy of how you actually figure out what is going on with the quality. So it's a matter of choosing your coverage. It's a matter of identifying the risks. It's a matter of choosing who will do the testing, and how you understand how something fails or passes or whatever it is that you use. So it's not tied to your role as such, even though I believe that when you think of the kind of risk-aware tester who's looking for problems, their presence in a team, in a separate role, will have an impact on the rest of the team, because it's kind of like if you're out of sight, you may not think about the issues that much, but developers sometimes have this tendency that if they see the tester or they feel the presence, then they start thinking a little bit differently about their own work. So it's kind of like a more implicit impact that you want to have somebody who's really focused on the risks and quality and is more like a coach to the team. So like there is no right or wrong role choice, so I would
Absolutely.
not take it there maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it's not about like a tester, it's about quality. Like testing can be done in automated way, which is fine. And in different situations, different approaches are taken.
Yeah. By the way, Pipedrive is tested by Testlio.
No, I'm not worried at all. No.
That's because we have a mobile client, which is kind of hard to call back or change quickly, right? So
that's a different strategy again.
Yes.
So
yeah, I actually very much connect to what Tiit says before, that from our perspective as well, it's I've always found that the goal to be to actually make yourself obsolete, right? If you're no longer needed, then you have brought the team or organization to a level that performs without you. And in that sense, getting rid of the QA, it's the same. It means that the quality is embedded into the way you work. And if that's how it is, then I think the holy grail is achieved. I mean, we had quite an interesting discussion driving from Tartu to Tallinn, and I had a challenge. I have a challenge articulating the value of testing as such, because I don't see it separate. I mean, what's the value of a developer? What's the value of a QA engineer? What's the value of an analyst? I mean, without any context, it doesn't have meaning, right? And maybe if this is translated into what's the value of a high-quality product versus what's the value of a low-quality product, then we can have meaningful discussions based on that, right? And
absolutely. Kristjan, yes, I wanted to
include me.
Let's include Kristjan. Kristjan, what do you think in Testlio, in Tester's office, internal or external testers or testing or automation or whatever? Because software, some might say that software development teams are like they are doing best software development and they don't want to focus on quality, like the unit tests and so on. Others say obviously it's their job, but should it be outsourced or should it be internal fully?
Wonderful question.
I have an answer to that. We're using Testlio as well.
Testlio, of course, provides a nice service. I find that internal people focusing on that, explicitly on that, rather than delegating it to analysts, product owners, or other risk assessors, or just good developers who know what they're doing, brings a bit of value because it brings visibility into the process a bit more explicitly. But outside, external partners are really good at asking questions that internal people don't ask because they already sort of know or assume. And that brings a different point of view to your product, your quality, your process, what you're doing. So I would suggest use both in all cases, depending on what product you have, what you're doing, does it make sense or not? Yeah,
absolutely.
both.
That's a good point. You have an interesting background. You went from development to testing and to now you're a development manager. So, and you went into testing by some accident, like usually people do, go into testing.
No, it wasn't an accident. It was very deliberate joke. It was a project meeting. We had a problem. Basically, testing resources were not enough to cover our project. We had one tester for 40 developers at the time, and I made a joke during a meeting that, hey, but give me a raise and I'll test it for you. Everybody laughed. It was funny. Half an hour after the meeting, the boss comes to me and says, well, were you serious? They gave me a raise and, well, here I am.
Did you like it?
Oh, yes. It's much better than development. You can do much more things.
So now as a development manager, are you fighting for testing resources? Are you like going around with the flag, testing is valuable and there is value in it? Or how does it go at the moment? Crystal, easy now.
Luckily, I didn't need to. I asked to prepare for this event. I asked a couple of business people in my company to what do they think, business value, etc. And one of the answers I got back was, I'll actually quote it because it was written in all capital letters. Testing is everything and immensely important. Also that we get proper tools for testing things. And this is a person who has no direct information about what testing does or how development is done. Is pure business person handling millions, and just that's the sentence I get. It's like, I don't have to wave the flag. What I do have to do is get the people actually work in a synchronized way through all the different locations and teams we have in order to actually have useful testing. Otherwise, there's a lot of overlap and inefficiencies.
Thank you. Helena, are you still excited about testing, being in testing forever? So
you mean inside, outside, that question?
Inside testing, like you have to go around and prove that testing is necessary, I assume, or in Nortal it's common, you don't have to prove?
I think so I've been there for 2.5 years, something like that. So I think the people's awareness has risen about testing and how to do it differently. And I think it's mostly through having normal conversations to people in the doing the coffee cup method, and sharing stories about where testing makes a difference to just help people kind of start thinking in their head, and then I noticed that 6 months later they start repeating things back to me that I have told them. So so yes, there is awareness, and I think it's something that testing can't prove that everything works, and it can only prove that it doesn't. And so it's also difficult to just, here, I have this business case, and now this will prove to you that testing is valuable and it works and we must do it. People develop their beliefs and what they and kind of relationship to something valuable over time. So and it's like the slow and hard path, and sometimes I get pissed, but it's okay because I see the change when people start coming back to me. It's kind of like, can you tell me more? Or, to bring people in and help them figure out on their own what the value is that they see in testing. And it may be slightly different. I used to work at a medical practice management company. It was US based, and they had got along without tester for almost 30 years. I mean, it was getting difficult by the time I entered the picture. But there it also took me like 2 years to get it like turned around and show and kind of like bring the examples and be useful and find the ways how to practically show people how, like, what the value is. But even so, we didn't agree on what it actually provided, because people took different things from testing. So I think it's okay, because overall we're both, like, both sides. If well, it's not like we're enemies, but on both sides we want the best for the customer. It's just we want to achieve it in different ways and through different means and through different strategies. So.
Einar, sorry.
I think.
Einar, I have another question actually for you. Why are we here? Why are we talking about business value of testing?
Okay.
Why is the question? I mean, you're not asking like business value of coding, development, and so on. It's like Android versus Apple. It seems like this, like we're fighting over it almost. Why is the question?
I don't. Well, okay. I think someone mentioned before the teams being formed, and I think something gets lost along the way when there is like a couple of guys, girls creating something, turning it into a business, and then suddenly, with success, there comes growth, and then there are teams and teams and teams, and there somehow barriers are erected between the teams, and suddenly you have to fight like this resource versus that resource, and I think maybe that might be going in the wrong direction, because if, of course, there are different extremes that at different times the company needs to focus on. At some point you need to focus on efficiency, and at some other point it's a completely different extreme. But maybe if we can somehow organize it differently, where the primary focus wouldn't be what's your role or which way do you turn that bolt, but rather it's how can you contribute. And if your background is QA, great. If your background is analysis, great. And put the relevant people together that via having the different backgrounds can create the best value in their cooperation. I think, well, I try to go that path, and assuming that we can scale this model, then I think that is by far better than just.
Yeah, so it would echo on both the last two speakers. I think the change what has come is actually coming with the development methodology. When I started in '95, Agile was already there, but nobody knew about it. When I went into 2000, we were doing heavy waterfall, and analysts were doing their work, throwing over the fence. Developers looked at the specs, and then there were some artists, like called designers, doing something. So when developers finished their work, designers didn't recognize what it was. And then at the very last moment, it was thrown to the QA, and those guys were like, oh, specs actually look also different in the real product, so let's try to test it now. These days, with Agile and Scrum and similar methodologies, we are a team of cross-functional responsibility, basically. So there is no individual responsibility assigned anymore other than a task that you promise to do, right? So when you deliver that task, after that everything becomes team's responsibility. Quality and testing and then the coverage and the speed and the accuracy, velocity, etc. are all team responsibilities, which means that cross-functional teams have testers, but those testers can code. And they also have developers who can actually write tests. Although there is certain mindset still built in, and it creates a conflict because, first of all, you can't debug your own code. I mean, that's anyone has been coding, it looks beautiful, right? So then you need to have a separate pair of eyes, and well, usually it's a code reviewer that reviews your change before it gets deployed. But I think the Agile and the team approach actually is changing the work for quality engineering and quality assurance function as we speak, or even it has changed already.
I guess it's also like what the market is like and how quickly you need to release. So you need to change your practices and get faster feedback, because it is all about the feedback. If I do this, what will happen? Like, do I have to wait 6 weeks to get a result, or can I get it instantly and make a better decision? Because eventually it's all about, do we ship it, or like we ship it, okay, but what's the status? So we need feedback, and we have different methods.
Yeah, actually developers have quite a big expectations already. We have a test suite, our automated UI test suite for Pipedrive is about 400 different test cases, and for API, for the backend, it's about 1,100 functional test cases. Those 1,100 functional test cases are executed in 8 minutes, because 10 minutes was too long.
Kristjan, you wanted to...
Yeah, I wanted to add regarding the methodologies. It reminded me when Gerald Weinberg was asked about what does he think about Scrum and Kanban and extreme programming and all these methodologies.
Maybe you should explain who Weinberg is.
You can do that later.
Okay.
You have met him, better than I do. And he said, well, when I started developing things back in the 60s, we called it common sense. But the point I want to make is that at that time there's a lot less people within the development world, and they were focused. They needed to do everything by themselves. Now that the growth has been huge, there's a lot more people involved. We need to be better at designing the roles and understanding the meaning of them, and being clear about it. So growth definitely impacts the way we work.
Yeah, so probably not everybody could get the development job back then. I mean, now it's much more open, so we get people of all quality in development, writing the code. I'm not talking about testing, just the code.
Absolutely. Thank you. Tiit, running a quality department, is that correct?
Well, yeah, my team is called quality engineering.
Okay, yes. Okay, quality engineering, yes. How's the success of that team measured? Is it like by the less blunders you have, or like the less bugs fly in, or basically, can you actually show here's the value?
I think so far it has worked out in a way that I say to Vice President of Engineering, my boss, that everything is okay and he trusts me. But this is not scalable. This is not scalable, and I wouldn't recommend to do, because we actually go back, 10 years. I guess, my team driver is twofold, two drivers basically. One, we are basically eliminating waste from the system. By automation, by changing processes, by changing tooling, and the other driver is increasing visibility, primarily feedback to developers. How quickly, how rich the feedback is, has all the logs been there, is it really workable, can you work with the data and get some statistical analysis, etc. So those two drivers, eliminating waste and creating visibility, this makes us very valuable for development teams, because we actually know how all those test infrastructure, tooling, etc. works. If you don't do that, if you don't configure Jenkins pipeline job every day, you don't do it. It's hard, actually. It's not the most convenient tool, although it's very powerful. We are actually forming a glue between ops and development team with the software engineers, so that DevOps, in a sense, could actually work. Because DevOps is a nice, it's an illusion, basically, that everyone can do anything on every day, and even if they haven't touched the tool for a year, they can still do it next day. It's not going to happen. This is not possible. I'm sort of slightly and slowly populating the function that I call quality engineering, and I see that this is actually the same thing is happening other teams as well, other companies.
Absolutely. Kristjan, you wanted to...
Yeah, when I was asked what's the value of testing, what do we provide for a company, then the simple answer was nothing. We don't do anything. If the product is in this state, a lot of testers do something with it. The product is still in that same state.
It may look worse.
Nothing changes for the product. The reason is testers provide some kind of information, something happens, but unless the rest of the company uses that in some way, nothing really happens. In that sense, testers alone don't bring any value to anybody.
Einar, you looked skeptical.
I'm simplifying
with all
a
respect,
bit.
I disagree. I mean, it's Tiit, you said that trust me, it's fine. And actually, I've never held a QA role, but somehow that's exactly what I would expect a quality product to be like. That it just works. And I think together with this, with the software development methodologies maturing, and all with the shift left movement, and the developers doing everything that they need to do to improve the quality, then I think that from my perspective, where I see the value in testing is it's wrong maybe to call it testing, but rather feedback. I like there is a company management culture in Japan, Kaizen and Gemba, where Gemba is focused on doing the job. We can correlate this or draw a parallel to developers, and then there is the Kaizen, like, okay, which direction do we go? And when you're tasked with something, okay, sometimes you have more time, sometimes you have less time. You can focus on getting the things done, right? But maybe if your approach to this is through QA, then you have an unfair advantage. You have a unique viewpoint. You can look at the solution and ask, okay, so what did the customer want? I mean, is what is developed the way that's most efficient? And I think through being involved at a very fast pace, where there is throwing the things over a wall and then coming back doesn't exist, but you're really involved in the cycle, then you have a chance as a QA person to really have a meaningful impact on the product. I mean, that's what we're trying to do at Rust Street.
I think the connection here is that it's like you really want to do something with the feedback, but what Kristjan was trying to claim that like the feedback itself is not enough if you don't act on it, or if the feedback is not actionable. So it may be there, but that in itself, just as a thing, it's just there, like you said. May not be worth nothing unless you act on it.
Well, but this comes back to the company culture. Where do we want to work? And, I personally, I want to work where my feedback is heard. So if that's the environment we want to create, then let's create that.
And that was my point, that you cannot actually take testing out of the equation of the whole process of building something and say that, does this bring value? By itself, no, but if it's incorporated well into the process, everybody understands what it provides, what's the feedback use, if it's accurate on time and as detailed as needed, then of course it helps us create a good product and it is valuable and everybody's happy with it. But by itself, it's nothing.
Okay.
I think I set you guys up for like an impossible description.
We're trying.
But the answer is simple. You can't succeed without testing. And you start out, I started with Testlio without testing Testlio.com itself. Crystal did something, but once you start getting traffic usage, then you realize first bug hits hard, second one, and that's what we're seeing in huge companies, customers as well. The bigger you are, the bigger the business impact of one crash, one bug, and so on. Then, yeah.
There's just more stuff you don't know. So
exactly,
the bigger it gets, the more there's stuff you don't know that's unknown. So you want to make sure that you know the stuff you need to know. So that's why you test.
It's getting a bit deep.
Oh, sorry. I'll pull it back out. Yes.
Just one example before, if we have business people and they don't really understand the development, the bugs and what the Scrum and stuff is, then my simple example is, well, business guys, you do partnership deals with other companies, whatever things you have contracts for 3 months, 6 years, whatever, and you get lawyers to look at things to make sure that the other company will not pull the chair under you or do other things or have something small scribbled in it. basically it's a very similar service that testers provide to help us see.
Great analogy.
Let's conclude the panel discussion with that. Thank you. We do have a Q&A. Crystal.
Yeah. Doesn't it always bother you when some people call Q&A?
It does.
I'm like, what?
Yes.
It means question assurance.
Yeah,
it just means those
quality advocate.
I have one quick comment. Sorry. I'm taking your seat again.
Go ahead.
I think it really depends regarding the value of testing, because what is the result if there is no testing? I mean, does anybody die? If people die, then there is a huge value in that, right? I mean, or are you at the position where you are losing your first mover advantage if you don't push your product to the market, and then these are the extremes, and somehow have to find the place. So I guess everything depends.
Absolutely, I've coded some nice scripts into my I don't know, closet or something, and nobody uses it, and it doesn't need testing, by the way. But if you do some medical devices, then you better test, right?
Medical practice management software, yes.
So let's give a round of possibility for others to ask questions.
Yeah. Ask them.
Thank you for the thought-provoking discussion here. My question is for you all panelists. If you could bestow one superpower skill to all testers, so that they may add more business value, more meaningful business value, what would that superpower skill be?
Care about the product.
Oh. Done. Learn to listen, maybe. Listen and speak. That's a good skill to have.
To do it well, yes, but.
Did you get your answer? Or,
no, I'm wait.
Yeah, I'm still also thinking.
Prioritizing.
I mean, what? Sorry.
I think. Well, since I taught a whole workshop today on testing, so I'm biased right now. But I think one of the key words is being risk aware, like the ability to think in systems and kind of pick up all the clues, kind of like Holmes does, and be the constant loop of could it be, what could happen, what if this, what if that. So I think that's something that kind of differentiates the really good tester from kind of doing a good job, because they're the ones who have this fuzzy bubble around their head. They're thinking risks, issues, problems, death. So that is like the superpower, I think, and connecting those ideas to the product. So that's like the power.
Yeah, my superpower, let's assume that there is some structured processes going on in developer's head. Then my superpower for the tester would be a mind-reading capability of developer. Because I'm okay if it's compartmentalized in the development only. I don't need to know anything else what he does in his free time. But really the quality of the team's output is really in communication and collaboration. When there is no protocol between tester and the developer, there is no communication, or it's slow, or there is some package drop. So you have to have that signal, carrying signal strong, and then the packets going in the right order, basically. Yeah.
Can I go deep once more?
Go ahead.
Just the one thing you said about collaboration is really important, especially in the teams, because in every small collective or team, there is stuff that people know, but they can't really explain how they know. I just know this is how it works. So there's a lot of this kind of mind share that needs to be cultivated and facilitated, so that the whole team is kind of connecting to each other's brains in a good way. And this won't really work if you set up the barriers or you don't facilitate it. But because most of the knowledge is kind of hidden and we can't verbalize it. But And there's some that we can make explicit. So
there shouldn't be stupid questions. There shouldn't be a shame or fear of losing out if you don't expose your incapability of understanding something. If these kind of things are there, teams are producing high quality
because if
code.
you don't understand, then it's a risk. Like it's a problem.
It's called cultural implicit knowledge, the third level of implicit knowledge.
Yes,
excellent.
thank you, thank you.
I think if you have genuine interest in what you're doing, and it doesn't even matter why, do you care about the result, or just care about because you want to do a great job, then everything else you can figure out. And if you don't have that, then nothing else matters. And if you do have that, then everything else can be learned. So that's
Nice. Does anybody else have questions?
Question over the back.
So say after development, internal testing, external testing, the product still has an issue. Who do you think is the most accountable in all this process?
Why does it matter?
Somebody has to be blamed.
Really? We were talking about teamwork. But really, I honestly ask, why does it matter to you?
Basically, as I said, like someone who is to point finger at.
Yeah. So I guess what I think you are actually trying to find out is who should fix it. Maybe, right? Because that's the thing you want to do at that moment. Yes.
Yes.
Of course, if it's possible to connect to the actual problem, right, then that developer should fix the problem and test it out, work with tester validates, etc. It's going out. If you don't have that, you don't know where the error is coming from, right? Then it's a team immediately team responsibility, because you actually get the bug in, you get the next bug, you have a backlog of 100 bugs, you are not managing it the whole thing anymore. And then you basically go into swamp.
But this is like when you have like a technical, a functional issue, but what if it's a problem like, well, this feature was supposed to be there, users kind of expected it, but it's not, so it is an actual problem now for the users, but like there is nobody to point the fingers at because like you didn't figure out what the market wanted, or you still want to have the finger. Remember, when you point the finger, there are 3 pointing back at you. Jerry Weinberg said that.
I would like to say that, again, from my perspective, if we get to the point of pointing fingers, then that's already an unhealthy environment, and it's very difficult to be successful and efficient in such an environment. And
absolutely, I agree. I think with that most as well, with everybody actually. So. You have this incident analysis, right? What happened? And then you don't point fingers. You find it out. You figure out whether we can actually avoid it next time, right? I think that's the normal process.
If we can ask, what can we do better? How can we make sure that this doesn't happen again? Because, well, if it was a problem for all of us. Then, that's you can go from there.
Let's have a next question.
Hey guys and girl.
Thank you. I'm a lady, not a girl, but okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Take it as a compliment.
No.
Okay, lady.
Thank you.
What's, in your opinion, the best metric to measure quality of a product or a release?
Exactly what Tiit was talking about. If he says, I think it's fine, then that's about the best metric ever. Especially because the underlying metric there is the trust that he has earned from the VC, that's enough. That's if the trust is there, then you don't really need the metric.
Actually, I've been also thinking about a little bit more scientifically about it. What you track is an NPS if you have product, Net Promoter Score, right? So you want to know how many people would recommend your product to other people, and if it's above 40s, close to 50, you are in heaven. But the problem is that what I haven't figured out yet is how quality actually impacts that, because if you ask directly quality question, the scientific problem becomes because you're measuring, and by measuring you impact. Mm-hmm. So you can't really ask. But if you have an NPS drop and you have bug count growing, you have a test code coverage growing lower, and you have less releases, more hotfixes, then that probably forms through clever equation some kind of an index that you're screwed.
Maybe did you write it down? The formula?
Yeah.
I would maybe suggest to ask, are your customers happy? Are they getting the service that they need? And if they are happy, then most likely you're doing a good job. If they're not happy, then something in the process is wrong. Now, whether that's a QA or not a QA doesn't really matter, right?
Would it be effective to measure that regularly? I mean, if it's a release, would you ask your
Trends.
all your clients all the time?
No.
I think that's a great question, and I think for anything to work in such an area, it needs to be periodic. If it's done once, you might as well not do it because it doesn't make any difference at the end of the day.
Snapshots don't help you, but one way that we've used to indicate how well we're doing is actually talking to customer service. Like, how are you feeling? Like, are people really annoyed, or are they kind of okay, the questions are reasonable, or are they really annoyed about the products? Or if they're overworked, then probably there's some issues that you need to sort out.
I have one quick, comment to add. We made our life, we're trying to innovate in our space, in gaming space, and one of the things we did is we put a chat room to our games, and we're creating like different kind of activities that would engage people, and the people would chat about it. There is like newsfeed of different events, and the chat room holds actually the entire team accountable. Doesn't matter if they're in customer support, doesn't matter if they're in engineering, because what do people do when they're not satisfied? They complain, right? So that's a great way how to actually get the feedback. If you can get it from the internal metrics, some kind of, building some graphs in Splunk and seeing that, okay, failure rate grows, there is probably something that I should do about it. And if you can do that before someone complains, great. If you do that, if you see someone complains, fix it.
And I guess the underlying question was about like one metric or like the metric? No, it's a combination. It's never go for just one. It's more like combination of metrics, which you need to find out yourself.
I think it always changes. The picture changes.
So I tried to establish quality metrics. The right answer is defect detection rate. Go sit down. So obviously it's not. A defect.
That's actually after the incident.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe the risk is too high, and if you have that failure, it's already too late.
Yes. So I tried to pull together quality metrics at Skype 3 times using internal resources and external consultancy. We never really got there, but where we got was that we started to simulate a lot. Simulate non-functional requirements measurements, simulate the performance of the application. We actually put the application into heavy use. So during some hours, we generated tens of thousands of calls of virtual machines calling to each other and measuring memory consumption, blah, blah, blah. So you gather that massive amount of data and you start to see trends over time. And that's your picture. There's no one answer, but you basically tells you that it's either that or it's either that.
So that's one type of testing, load testing. But like the answer I think came out. There's no one metric.
I think one maybe small twist that I mean you can picture changes. Nothing stays static. Even if you find the metric that might work for you best in that given moment of time, who says that it's going to work for you tomorrow? So I think you need to ask.
So it's not one dashboard. No. Let's go to the next question. Thank you for that question, by the way.
So hi, coming back to the value of testing or testers, don't you think it just comes down to using the right tool for the right job? I mean, if you have a hammer and you use it for everything, the end result wouldn't be exactly the same as using the right tool. I mean,
you basically answered your own question. I admire that. That's amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
It was a a good question, approach.
But maybe somebody wants to comment it further.
Meelis wants to comment it, it seems.
There's somebody at the very back.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Meelis, go ahead.
Thank you. So what's your biggest blunder regarding like not doing enough testing, and how did you calculate or evaluate the business damage that actually resulted from that?
Yeah.
From your, you can talk from your own personal experience with names and data.
Yeah. I can do it because I know exactly what it is. It was release of 3.0 Skype client. We actually already had pretty thorough release checklist in place, and one of the checklist item was the evaluation of known bugs, and the release got pushed out because of the business reasons. I said no, and but my boss was influenced by management to say yes. We made 8 hotfixes to the client, and it went out with hundreds of open issues. That was, I did the right thing, but I didn't maybe escalate it, or I was not able to articulate what's going to happen. Now I know. So
how many dollars did you lose then?
I think actually we didn't, because the problem with Skype was that we had so good traction that it overruled everything. I mean, even my QA budget was several million euros outsourcing money. I tested the client at 2 sites at the same time, and I got different results back, by the way. So with the same scripted test case database. Because the traction was so good, and the one issue escalated immediately throughout the user base of millions of users, the money was just there. And there was so much money thrown at the problem that almost saved us. At least it made Skype pretty successful until now.
It's good that you have money to throw in. Yeah. Other examples where you didn't have money to throw in?
Maybe let's take the next question.
I haven't actually. I don't know if it's a blunder. It's not a blunder. Basically, what we did at early years of Playtech, we created this product from scratch, poker, and what we did is what everyone advises you not to do. We basically just pushed it to the customers and said, okay, they have to test because we simply don't have time to do it.
But most startups do that these days.
Well, we got lucky. We built a nice business. Oh. So, a blunder with a twist, if you will.
Yeah. Customer testing.
Yeah.
Helena,
I was trying to remember something from when I got started, and I think it was more like it could be something that many people have gone through, but kind of taking some part of the product as a hostage and not letting the business to release, or telling the business it's really bad, and while yes, there were issues, but while you haven't asked the question, so what would happen if we actually didn't release? Like, what's the cost of that? And I guess that's part of. Just there was a time when I was still figuring things out, so that's something I remember, that when I realized that I forgot to ask the business question, like, so what will it cost to the business to release or not to release? I was like, oh, I have caused some trouble here, and it's not just it's not that the business was completely, luckily, following all my advice at the time, but it hurts your credibility. So I think that's why the tester needs to really talk to the business in a different way as well. So.
Okay, Kristjan.
Okay.
Maybe use names, but
it was back when I was working with Bang & Olufsen, and we were about to soon to do a release of a new flagship TV, really important for the company. Actually, it was about not even a release to customers, it was a show on IES. So like, this needs to work, this needs to be perfect. And the problem that I had was that, well, I actually cared too much. I made a lot of noise that this is not good enough. We're gonna have a problem. We're really gonna have a problem, up to the point that I mailed the VC at the time. That was like going 4 or 5 levels higher, and saying, yeah, we're gonna have a problem. Obviously, that came crashing down to me with a lot of attention, and turned out that actually we didn't have a problem because the way the show was set up and everything was done, it was covered. But I cared so much because I saw so many little problems. It's just that I wasn't synced enough with the